Everybody to this afternoon's portfolio awareness session. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Leslie McGran and I'm a member of the DHCNI team, and I'm responsible for the design side, the discovery side of the portfolio. I have a couple of colleagues on the call with me this afternoon. Jennifer Mills, who many of you will be familiar with, is our portfolio support officer, and she keeps us all right. And during this session, she'll be keeping an eye out for questions or raised hands, and letting Kitty and myself know that people are there with questions. And also my colleague Kitty Gunning, who is part of the presentation this afternoon as well with myself, where we're going to take different parts of the session. So just before we launch in, just a few wee housekeeping things. We intend to record today's session. So if for some reason you have to step away or you have to drop off the call, we will have a recording of it available. And we will be sharing materials, the PowerPoint presentation, with everybody afterwards. We hope to maintain a mailing list within the Enterprise Portfolio Office, so that whenever there are updates to any processes or new guidance issued, that we have a mailing list to send out to. And our intention is to add everybody who's registered for these sessions to that mailing list. If for any reason you don't want to be included in that mailing list, if you just email the DHCNI portfolio at hfcni.net address, and we'll take your name off that list, but otherwise we'll just automatically add you to it. And just the other thing I was going to say is, at the minute, we don't have a website or a SharePoint site where we can post material that is available for people to access. That is the intention, and we hope within the next 6 months or so that we will have that facility. But if there's anything that you want access to that is mentioned today, if you just again email that DHCNI portfolio address, and we can make material available. So without further ado, I'm just going to launch in, and I'm going to close this presentation down. Just going to stop sharing. I have an introduction here from Dan West, who unfortunately wasn't able to join us today, but he has recorded his introduction. And just bear with me a second while I play with the technology. Hopefully everybody can see that video.
Hello everyone, and I am delighted to add my welcome to these My name is Dan West. I work at the Department of Health. My role is the folks that you'll be talking to today would be my colleagues in the Digital Health and Care Northern Ireland team. What I thought I would do just at the start of this meeting is provide a couple of minutes of introduction to describe to you why I believe that the Enterprise Portfolio Management Office is really important, and I believe that it is going to be really important for all of you as well as you hear about what we're trying to achieve here today. I'm just going to share a few slides to help me with this introduction. So if anybody hasn't seen this picture before, it's the very high level summary of the accountabilities that I've got in this role as CDIO. This is what was agreed with Richard Pengelly, who I report to in the Department of Health, and has been the direction for the work that I've been doing over the last couple of years. There are 5 main areas, and I'll pause and talk about one just in a little bit more detail as part of this introduction here. The first area is setting the kind of vision and strategy for digital transformation of health and social care. The second one is organizing and managing digital delivery. The third is around improving the use of and value from health and care data. The fourth then is, as we're using data and systems more and differently, overseeing information governance and cyber and information security. And then the fifth area is quite a nebulous one about driving innovation and engagement and looking at emerging technologies and thinking about the health and social care digital innovation ecosystem in Northern Ireland and how we work with academia and the private sector. The one that I'll talk about a little bit more is number 2 here, organising and managing digital delivery for health and care. And that includes overseeing delivery frameworks and organisations and structures, and developing coherent and comprehensive investment plans, and through that, ensuring crucially that the really significant investment portfolio that we have put into health and care for digital over the last couple of years, and will continue to do this year and in the future, that we are seeing the benefits, the value from that, from the citizen and staff perspective in health and social care. So for me, the PMO is a really key part of the operating model that we've put in place in this team, DHCNI, Digital Health and Care Northern Ireland. What you can see on this slide here is a high-level summary of that operating model, ranging from the development of that strategy that we just talked about in my accountabilities on the previous page, thinking about our data and analytics and insight capabilities, both in the centre and out in the arm's length body and provider trust organisations, all the way through to things like digital workforce and capability development and digital communications. The bit in dark blue in the middle here is where we manage the delivery of our portfolio, and where we are focused at the moment through the work that Katie and Leslie have been doing, and we'll talk to you about more today, developing an enterprise portfolio management office capability. So that is where we develop our blueprint and do the commissioning of those projects and programs that are going to be in the portfolio in the future. And through that, we manage the kind of backlog of requirements that are as yet unmet within the system. We also do the portfolio management. So how do we maintain visibility and transparency of activities and dependencies across that portfolio, and how do we then provide similar transparency on delivery activities and progress that's being made, and any obstacles and challenges that are affecting our ability to deliver the portfolio. The third leg of the stool, if you think of it that way, around enterprise portfolio management is then the finances. So having established on a project and program basis the profile for both capital and revenue utilization for delivery of a set of outcomes, there then needs to be overarching management at the aggregated portfolio level of financial performance. And where inevitably programs and projects slip, we have good control and management of the impact of those slippages, both on our ability to deliver outcomes and dependencies within a particular year, but also our ability to then manage the impact on further years as we then do our longer range financial planning and forecasting. So you can see down the left-hand side of this slide, as we build these enterprise portfolio capabilities, there's a set of key objectives that we're seeking to achieve. And the hypothesis here is that we haven't been able to do these things historically, and the importance of development of these enterprise portfolio management functions is key, certainly for me and my accountabilities, but it's key for all of you as you then go through the process of defining, requesting, designing and implementing new technology solutions, and leveraging the significant capital and revenue investments that we've got in the portfolio over the course of the next kind of 5 to 8 year horizon. So the objectives are effective discovery and prioritization work to improve the way the portfolio is designed and commissioned, and crucially developing the capacity to work through that backlog of critical new requirements and projects. Developing and maintaining that integrated portfolio delivery plan that covers all of the programs and projects, and crucially standardizes how we go about doing planning, how we define milestones, and then reporting of progress against those milestones in a really consistent and data-driven way. Delivering that new dependency management process, identifying and resolving the disconnects between the major and minor programs and projects within the portfolio, and understanding the critical path such that when one thing changes, which inevitably it will, that we are really good and rapid at managing the implications of those changes, not within that individual project or program, but across that network of projects and programs within the portfolio. And finally, establishing this new approach to benefits realization across all of the work that we're doing, linking the discrete benefits to one another, and ensuring that we challenge ourselves to deliver tangible efficiencies rather than some of the historic trends that we've had, where intangible efficiencies within individual programs have been consumed through reinvestments that have sometimes been opaque at the wider aggregated program level, and ensuring that overall the digital benefits that we deliver link to and support the achievement of the wider HSC business strategy. And my final thing that I wanted to share with you guys today is thinking about my first accountability around developing a new vision and strategy for how digital can support health and care in the region. You guys might be familiar with the current document, which is the e-health and care strategy developed in 2015 and launched in 2016. We are going to be replacing that. We had hoped to do it a little bit earlier than we are, although the last 14 months has been pretty busy for the DHCNI team as we've been running around and delivering a suite of new digital products and services in support of our pandemic activities. The best place to go for anyone, and this is entirely open and transparent, and anybody can get access to these documents. The best place to go to get a sense of in FY 21-22 what our strategic priorities are and how they have then influenced the establishment of the investment portfolio for the next 12 months is in the financial plan for FY 21-22. As I say, if you haven't had a chance to get a copy of that and look at it, then please ask for one and we'll supply it to you. There is a risk assessment that we've done against our financial plan for the next 12 months that will add some just additional colour to what we were able to develop over the kind of January, February, March timeframe as we were going through the approval processes for the financial plan for this current year. And that risk assessment will set out a little bit more of the strategic context. So those documents together, I think, will be really useful for anybody to get a sense of what we're saying today about our vision and our journey towards a roadmap and a blueprint that's executable for the 3 to 5 year horizon. The addendum, which is this risk assessment and more strategic context, that document is in draft and will be available in the coming days and weeks. The arrow here on the right-hand side indicates that we are intending on doing the full vision and strategy development work. That's currently pitched to be a Q1 FY 21-22 activity, so this month and over the next couple of months. But that is going to be somewhat dependent on the continued burden that the pandemic puts on our team. If, for instance, we are going to be delivering things like COVID vaccination certification for international travel, that will be a new set of digital products and services that will continue to absorb time from the team. So with that context setting, I'm going to hand back to Katie and Leslie. I hope you guys enjoy the session today, and I hope you, like me, realize how important it is for enterprise portfolio management to be a real success for all of us, both in individual projects and programs and as a broader system for ourselves, our colleagues, our families to get the best possible health and care services in the region. Thanks very much. Have a great time.
Leslie, you're on mute.
It had to happen sooner or later, sorry. I'm just going to hand over to Katie for the next section of this afternoon session.
Thank you, Leslie. Could you just give me a nod if I'm sharing the presentation? That's great. Thanks very much. So I have a short 10 to 15 minute introduction following on from Dan's, just to give a brief overview on what the overall portfolio management approach is. This will be in 2 sections, and we will get into a little bit more detail then after this introduction, where Leslie will lead on the processes that we have established in place already around system blueprint and digital commissioning. And I will take you forward a little bit through the portfolio management delivery functions that we have in place. So just to revisit the capability model, which Dan referred to in his introduction, and really within the team, we have approximately 15 capability areas, which Dan decided was necessary to enable him to deliver across the accountabilities, which he referred to. And today we are just referring to 2 of those, number 6, which is the system blueprint and digital commissioning, and number 9, which is the digital portfolio management. And that's really set in the context of the overall accountabilities and the other areas of the capability model. And so today we are just looking at number 6 and number 9, led by Leslie and myself. And in terms of we've heard the terms, the DHCNI portfolio management, and we have looked at the enterprise portfolio function. And really just to set the tone for this afternoon session is that DHCNI portfolio is really concerned with the overall initiatives that are required to be delivered to enable us to achieve our digital objectives. And that's really it in a nutshell. And that's the function that's sitting here in the middle layer of the triangle. It does not in any way replace any of the existing governance arrangements that are already established in terms of projects and programs. And many of you on the call today are representing or indeed leads of these projects and programs that are here along the bottom. So they will continue, and as they do, they serve an excellent process in providing oversight and management of individual projects. The enterprise portfolio management layer is this layer in the middle, which sits neatly on top of that, and it's looking across issues and plans across the whole enterprise portfolio function. And there are two key areas in this. The first one is the portfolio design group. And that's the group that is chaired by my colleague, Leslie. And the role of this function is to prioritise the overall portfolio, looking at the initiatives, new asks, and prioritising those in the context of the overall financial window, and then developing the financial plan. And sister to this is the DHCNI Portfolio Delivery Group. And that group's responsibility is to ensure that we are delivering all the initiatives in the right way that we have agreed through the portfolio design function. We're looking across issues across different projects. What are the interdependencies? If there's a slip in one project, what is the impact of that on another project? And underneath and underpinning all of those is the Enterprise Portfolio Management Office, and we have some resources within the team or on the call today who are members of this Enterprise Portfolio Management function. Both these groups report through then to our leadership group, and we have also on the call today some representatives from the DHCNI Leadership Centre, and the two fundamental groups we wanted to draw out here are our DHCNI Portfolio Board, and that at the moment is chaired by Stephen Stewart. And the role of that board is to approve the overall portfolio design and plan, has a responsibility in approving some of the mandates and business cases, particularly larger ones over 1.5 million. And the groups beneath that I have just referred to, if they have any major issues, they are reported through to the DHCNI Portfolio Board, which ultimately reports through to the DHCNI Board, which Dan West chairs. That's represented in the next screen. So again, if we're working from the bottom up, many of you are here on the call today represent projects that are already reporting through to either straight through from your individual projects into the DHCNI Portfolio Office. You may also have the luxury in some cases of a local PMO office. Some of these organizations, for example, where the BSO-ITS is a very efficient PMO office. Other organizations have similar arrangements. Some are at a more project and program level, but ultimately there are in almost all of our organizations existing PMO offices and arrangements. All of these then report through to this middle layer, which we're referring to today, which on the left is the portfolio design and on the right is the portfolio delivery, and up through as I had explained. And this slide just briefly illustrates how these functions of enterprise portfolio really sit in the context of the overall DHCNI governance arrangements. So we have this section in the middle where we have the portfolio board groups and program boards, but those sit alongside other groups that we have established within the DHCNI governance, for example, Enterprise Architecture Board, and we have colleagues on the call today representing this forum. We have the Strategic Information Board, and again, so those are other governance structures that we sit side by side with in terms of the overall governance. But it's this function here, second in, that we are going to talk a little bit more in detail today. This slide represents our overall governance reporting cycle. So if I just refer to the portfolio design group and the delivery group, those two groups meet consecutively approximately 2 hours each after each other. And the next cycle of those is on the 12th of May. And then thereafter, the next groups are in the 7th of July. Just after these groups meet, then we have the DHCNI portfolio with about a 2-week window in between. And that allows us to be able to present to the DHCNI portfolio board any major issues that have arose from these groups through. And the DHCNI board then meets every quarterly in between. So specifically referring to then the overall portfolio management approach, there are two key functions, design and delivery, and some will refer to these as the yin and the yang of portfolio management. All of this on the left-hand side, Leslie will talk through today in terms of understanding what the new initiatives are, getting a better understanding of those, planning them, working through prioritization. And then once that is completed, then those initiatives that we have agreed sit within their strategic context, sit within their financial plan, make their way over into portfolio delivery. And I will talk a little bit in the later section of the agenda today on functions that are that we have in place for portfolio delivery, for example, in and around planning, in and around risk management. But also there are many issues in this portfolio that we have not yet established. For example, we're very aware that we do not have an established benefits management function, but we are at a point in time in our evolution of the portfolio management where we have sufficient planning agreed, processes in place, and where it is very appropriate that we run these sessions today to discuss with you what's in place. And I suppose it would be remiss to say that many of these processes have been agreed with many of the stakeholders that are on this call and also joined us in the sessions yesterday. So the last slide in this introduction session is really just to rehearse what we have gone through in terms of the two functions of portfolio management around portfolio design, which is represented on this slide by the grey filter. And again, that's making sure our initiatives are aligned with our overall strategy, that we've prioritized them and that we've communicated that back. So those functions all sit along portfolio design, and Leslie will take through the processes for that. The other part of this is the portfolio delivery, where it's really looking at for the initiatives that are making up the overall portfolio, and we'll talk a little bit about those later, which ones those are, how we track the progress in those, are there any deviations from the plans, and that is not, I suppose, just to draw out at this stage, that's not to replicate what is happening in terms of individual projects and programs monitoring. It is at that portfolio level. Is there any deviations from the plan and all of that activity? And it's deliberately drawn here as a cycle, because in many cases, it may be appropriate that a new initiative has came. For example, last year, most of us was involved in some COVID work. That resulted in some changes to the existing plan that we had. So you may need to stop some initiatives. You may need to seek additional funding or other resources. So it is very much a cyclical process. Agreed at the beginning of the year, and Dan referred to the financial plan, which is driving our plans for this year. But throughout the year, there will be necessary to revisit the plan, and like any plan, that will be subject to change. So that really represents the two pieces of the overall portfolio approach that we intend to cover off today. So I'll hand back now the share to my colleague, Leslie.
Thank you, Kitty. Just before I move on, I suppose I'm just going to pause to see if anybody has any particular questions about what we've covered in that short section. Nope, don't see any hands raised or any questions. So I'll move on then. Thank you. Just bear with me a second while I share my screen. So in my section this afternoon, I'm going to cover three areas: portfolio definition practices, the DHCNI commissioning process, and then the business case approval process, because that's also an area that I have responsibility for. And Jennifer will keep an eye on the chat or on the screen for raised hands. I'll pause periodically to take those questions if anybody has any. So the first part is the portfolio definition practices. So in designing the portfolio practices and processes, we have 7 stages throughout the lifetime of a project or program, and the discovery stage is the stage that is part of the design processes in the portfolio approach. So in the discovery stage, typically we receive requests for new projects. We do some scoping work on those, and then we take them through a project to consider, or a process, sorry, to consider whether or not they are added to the portfolio plan. And if that is the case, then that leads to the development of a mandate, a commissioning document if required, and the issuing of an SRO letter were appropriate. And it's just to say that SRO letters under 1.5 million are issued by the CDIO. Over 1.5 million, they're issued by the Permanent Secretary. There are 5 practices in the management of portfolio approach, in the definition practices, in the management portfolio approach. So that design phase, there are 5 practices that we follow in that approach. And these are, the first one is to understand. So that's about gathering the information about new projects, new requests that come through to ourselves, and understanding, well, what's being asked of that project, what does it need to deliver, what problems is it trying to fix. The next practice is the categorized practice, where we look at those requests and we put them into categories as agreed. At the minute, we don't have agreed categories, and I'll explain a wee bit more about that in a minute. But we roughly categorize projects at the minute into a small project block, so smaller projects that we need to prioritize against each other. Infrastructure, where we need to make sure that we maintain a stable infrastructure. And that would include things like cybersecurity. Transformation and rebuild is another category that we would categorize things into, and then service improvement. The prioritized practice then is about looking at all of the projects in each of the categories and prioritizing them within that category. And then balance is where we look across all of those categories and the prioritized projects, and we balance the portfolio in relation to the affordability, the resources, the benefits that we will derive. I should have said that all of this is done against the strategy, which, as you heard Dan explain in the previous segment, we haven't got yet. We have no DHCNI strategy, and that DHCNI strategy will be developed, we hope, over the course of the next few months. And it will be developed against the regional strategies for HSCNI. So, you know, the outcomes of the Rebuild Management Board, the transformation agenda, and all of that other work that's going on. So in balancing the portfolio, we would be looking to balance it across the strategic drivers, across the outcomes that are expected out of that strategy and the benefits that we expect to obtain. And then we put them on the plan. So the plan is continually being reviewed and looked at in the light of all these other practices that we would run maybe once or twice a year overall to look at the portfolio plan. And the ambition is to have a rolling 5-year plan. So we always know 5 years in advance what we have on the plan. And every time we get new requests in and we run through these definition practices, we're constantly assessing the plan. Also against the projects and programs that are already in train and against the new ones that are coming through. So just to explain practically the processes that we have set up so far to help the portfolio definition and the portfolio design phase. So we have designed a new request form, and we ask that anybody who has a new project or a new initiative that they want to take forward, which they are seeking either DHCNI funding for, capital funding for, or for which they require some sort of commission to be done in order to obtain resources and support, particularly from BS or YTS, but maybe from some of our other delivery organisations as well. We ask that you fill in that new request, and that request is sent to the Enterprise Portfolio Management Office via the DHCNI portfolio at hscni.net address. When we receive your request, we will arrange an initial meeting with you, try and understand a bit more about the details of that request and what it is you're trying to achieve, what the drivers for the initiative are, any strategic drivers that there are, any mandated drivers that might be there as well. And when we have had that meeting, the output of that meeting goes to the portfolio design group to review the request. And that should all happen fairly quickly. We, as Katie has already said, we have those meetings every other month. So that should give us enough time to have the meeting with you and get the output of that through to the design group. The design group will look at that request, and the design group has representation both from DHCNI team members who are responsible for enterprise architecture, for innovation, and for information. But we also have representatives from trust to represent both IT function and the service function, and we have CCIO representation on that group as well. So we have as many parts of the service as we can represented on that group. They will review that initial request, and the output of that review will be either one of two things in the end. There's a possible third outcome. We'll either reject the request because it's not considered to be in line with the strategy, it maybe won't deliver the benefits in time, it might be something that Encompass is going to replace with the EPIC solution, and the group feel that it won't be possible to deliver the benefits before EPIC replaces the new solution that you'll be implementing. Or it might be that the portfolio design group considers the request more of an innovation type request, something that maybe needs a proof of concept or a pilot. And in that circumstance, they would hand that over to the innovation steering group. And that's the reason that the innovation group, the innovation lead sits on this portfolio design group from DHCNI, because then, and that's actually Sue Hunt, and Sue will be able to take that and put it through her processes. Or the group decides it's something that we need to do more detailed scoping on, and they will then accept the request at this stage and hand it over to the discovery team to carry out some further scoping. The discovery team sits within DHCNI at the minute. And when I say team, it's a team of one at the minute, because Damien Moore, who will head up that team, hasn't got anybody working with him just at the minute. He had a few people before Easter, but unfortunately lost the funding for that. So at the minute, Damien is the discovery team. But the purpose of the discovery team is to go and meet with a wider group of stakeholders in relation to the request. Maybe they might do some market scanning. They would try to understand what the possible benefits of the solution would be, and try and make an estimate of the timescales and the costs involved should the assignment or the project go forward. It's not as detailed as a business case. It's probably as much detail as you would expect to find in a project mandate, and we have designed the template that the discovery team then populates. Once the discovery team has carried out that work, and the hope is that most of that discovery work can happen within 2 to 3 months, just depends on the size of the project and the range of stakeholders that need to be engaged with. The output of that goes back to the design group again, and again the design group will give you more detailed information. The discovery document will have a recommended course of action on it. The design group will consider that. They will consider whether they want to take that recommendation or make another recommendation. And if at that stage the design group decide again that they need to reject the new request because it's not going to deliver benefit, in the course of the discovery, we've discovered that somebody else is already doing the same thing somewhere else in the system, so there's maybe a different approach can be taken, or it's not in line with strategic direction. So that might be reasons why it's rejected. If it's accepted, then it goes forward to the portfolio board for them to consider the request, and the outcome of that will again be they'll either reject it or pass it to the DHCNI board for final approval. If it's accepted, basically what the portfolio board is saying at that stage, we think that this is a project that should be added to the portfolio plan. Here's our recommendation for when it should be added. Here's what we think the costs are, and here's what we think the benefits are. And so the DHCNI board have final say on whether it goes on to the project or the portfolio plan or not. It's unlikely at that stage that the DHCNI board would reject that recommendation from the portfolio board. It is a possibility though, because they have the ultimate the final say in the portfolio plan. But if they accept the recommendation and it's agreed, then it's added to the portfolio plan. So the practices that are involved in the design phase of the portfolio management approach, they sit over the top of this. You can see that throughout the process, we're continually understanding what the ask is. When we have developed a methodology for the categorization and the prioritization of the portfolio, once we have a strategy in place, that will be a piece of work that needs to take place. We'll need to consider then, well, how do we apply a methodology to the prioritization against the strategy? I have a couple of recommended prioritization methodologies in reserve, that are their industry standard, but they can't be implemented without the strategy. then we're constantly looking to make sure our portfolio is balanced. And by that I mean, if we spent all our money rolling out devices to people and didn't look at the applications that we're going to run in those devices, that they're not really a lot of use. But this vice versa is true. We can have brilliant applications, but if people can't access them on the device that they need where they need it, well, there's no point in rolling that out either. So we always need to make sure our portfolio is balanced, both in terms of where the money is being spent, but also in terms of meeting the strategic objectives. And then, as I said, they're added to the plan. So these are all interconnected. It's a continual cycle, as Katie explained before. And that's how we hope to get to the plan. So once we have the processes in place and things have started to work through those processes, we've already seen the output of the first few discovery documents coming through to the portfolio board. We still have that final piece to do around how we prioritise the projects and we make sure it's balanced. And closely working with the finance function as well, because obviously, they need to advise about what funding is available, but also the development of a 5-year plan gives us a basis on which to have a better conversation with the Department of Health about the future year's funding that we will require in order to maintain a portfolio that meets the strategic needs and direction of HSC. Before I move on to the next section, I'm just going to pause there, and I can't see at the minute if you have questions, and I can't see the chat. So maybe Jennifer, will you just check with anybody any questions about that before I move on to the next part?
Yes, Leslie, there are just 2 queries in the chat room at the moment. I've just checked the screens and there's no hands up. In terms of the chat room, Stephen Powell has wrote, how does this new request process map to the, how does this new request process map to the bids process that Mark Eustace manages, and are the forms electronic?
That's a really good question, Stephen. So first of all, the forms are not electronic at the minute. As I said at the start, we hope to have some sort of client-facing website or site where we can share our processes, our documentation, and at that stage we would hope to be able to make the forms electronic. In relation to the bid process, so just to explain, each year as part of the finance function, Mark sets aside a certain amount of funding for trusts, and that's allocated on a capitation basis, and we will write to trusts to ask them to submit bids for against their share of that funding. In relation to an electronic form for that particular thing, Stephen, it is our hope that each trust will have an account on the Cora project management system that BSO are currently working with ourselves to implement, and you will be able to put your bids on that electronically. For various reasons, that doesn't lend itself to making that available for the request forms to be put on electronically, because you have to have an account on that system to be able to use that portal. And in order for this request process to work for everybody in HSC, everybody would need an account in Cora to be able to go on and put on a new request, or if not everybody, a large number of people, and that would mean buying a license for those people. So that's not a practical thing that we can make available at the minute, but certainly for your bids against your share of the capitation budget that's set aside for trusts, you would continue to follow the same process that you have been following, and there will be an electronic form available on Cora for you to make those bids. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. Listen, thanks very much. And this is very, very useful, and thanks for putting it all together. I suppose the opportunity for South Eastern Trust to unilaterally submit a bid into Mark Eustace for a project that is probably aligned to the strategy or should go through this process. It could happen, I would imagine. And it's just how do you stop me from being bold doing things like that?
Okay, I'll not give the answer honestly. When those bids come in, they are shared within the DHCNI team. So they are. So we in the EPMO will see them. So if we spot something that we think shouldn't go through the bid process, but should come through the request process, then we'll flag it at that stage. But in reality, Stephen, that's likely to be things that are over 250k and outside of trust delegated limits, because largely the bid stuff relates to that smaller value items, and it's largely for things like keeping your infrastructure stable and replacing switches and that sort of thing, as opposed to project work. So we would spot it when it comes through, it would be flagged. That's not to say that it couldn't legitimately be used for some smaller projects as well, and that's the kind of thing we consider against the bids. Does that answer your question? I can't see anybody on the.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. I suppose if in doubt, pick up the phone is will be.
I think so. Yeah, if there's individual things, pick up the phone. Yeah.
Leslie, there was also a final comment in the chat room from Declan McAllister. He was anticipating that this new process for the smaller ALBs to take forward their ICT strategic requests and for project support in delivery.
Yes, Declan, that would be the process that we would ask people to follow. One of the things I should say that one of the things that we acknowledged we weren't good at this year, and it's a combination of trying to establish new processes, not properly shutting down the old processes, and the pandemic. We would have regularly, we being the previous health and care team in the board, would have gone out and had regular commissioning engagements with our stakeholder organisations. That didn't really happen. Well, it didn't happen this year. And one of the key performance indicators that the portfolio design group has at the minute is for the development of a stakeholder engagement plan for the purposes of portfolio design. So we know, we hold our hands up and say we didn't do that well this year, but we do need to be making sure that we are in regular contact with our stakeholder organisations to understand their strategic priorities as well, because we acknowledge that whilst there'll be an overall DHCNI digital strategy and there's the overall HSE strategies, individual organisations then have to have their own strategies for how they're going to meet those regional strategies. So yes, it's the short answer, Declan, and we hope we are better at engaging with our stakeholders in the next year, and we'll be putting together a plan for that.
Leslie, that's really welcome news. As you know, I represent many of the smaller arm's length bodies in health and social care. We've been looking for strategic ICT support since shared services went live almost 8 or 9 years ago. So really pleased that this is now in place for a lot of the smaller arm's length bodies who simply do not have the ICT resources in-house anymore and are very dependent on experts within DHCNI to assist and support. So thank you very much.
I think, Damien, Declan, sorry, the other comment I would make there as well is that we've realised that we don't have the ALBs represented on the portfolio board, and Stephen has undertaken, well, I think he has written to Karen, not Karen Bailey, I think maybe to the ALBs to ask them to nominate somebody to represent the ALBs on that portfolio board. So, we did acknowledge that we hadn't those groups represented on our decision-making body. So
thanks, Leslie. Thank you.
Right. So is there anything else, Jennifer? Will we move on?
No, that's it. You can move on.
Thank you. So the next slide, it's busy, as a busy slide, there's a lot to it. It's quite hard to read, and it largely reiterates what I've already covered. It's just a more detailed swim lane diagram, I think, of the different communications and decision points in that simplified process that I showed in the last section. But all I really wanted to draw out here is that once something is added to the plan, the EPMO will work with the project lead to develop the mandate. The mandate goes to the portfolio board for approval. After that, the commissioning documents are prepared, if one's required, and the SRO letter is prepared and signed by the relevant authority and issued. And at that point, the design function then notifies the delivery function in the EPMO that the project can enter the startup phase, and that's the end of the design discovery phase. This next slide is just to give you an example of the kind of information that comes to the design group and the portfolio board in the bi-monthly design report. Those who sit on those groups and who are present today will recognise these slides. As you can see, at the minute, there are about 50 potential projects sitting on the pipeline, a lot of those are legacy things that were sitting on that pipeline whenever I took on this role. And we're working to try and cull that a wee bit and get down to an actual list that we can start to do some actual prioritisation against. So for example, at the minute, I'm aware there's a number of things in that list that are sitting as requests that could possibly be funded through our small project block, which is a block of money we set aside each year for those smaller projects, in addition to what the trust get on that capitation share for their smaller pieces of work. And we need to actually do something with those requests and look at them in the light of that small project block and start to prioritise and allocate the funds out to them. So those are that's the next job, if you like, for the design function in the EPMO in preparation for the next round of meetings to take recommendations to those groups for approval. And this slide will not mean an awful lot to you, but the DH numbers that you see there is the reference number that we give every project. So from the point that a request is made, we add a potential project to the list with a reference number that helps us reference it. As I said, we don't have an agreed process for prioritising projects and balancing at the minute, but we're using a score of 1 to 5 of urgency and a score of 1 to 5 of importance to try and get an idea of where our most high priority projects are and where we maybe should be looking to fund. This was done, that has been shared with, a number of times with the design group and the portfolio board. It was an initial assessment. It's open to challenge from members of those groups, and we have been challenged on some of them, and that starts the conversation about where things should sit. But it's just to give you an idea of how we're trying to prioritise at the minute. It's a bit crude. It's not, very refined, but it's the best approach we have at the minute until we get to the point where we have an agreed prioritisation methodology against a strategy for DHCNI. And then this final slide just shows you the different templates and requests that we have developed as part of this process. So it takes you through the process, if you like. There's the new request form. There's the discovery template. If something goes to discovery, we then have our project or programme mandate, the commissioning agreement, and finally the SRO letter template, which is developed by the Department of Health, and which we have taken and tailored to meet the needs of DHCNI. And the DHCNI portfolio design and commissioning process is documented in a process document. And again, this is one of the documents we would make available externally or on request if people want a copy of it. And we would keep it updated as our project, our programme, our portfolio processes continue to evolve. I'm just going to pause there before going on to the business case section. Any other questions just as a result of that last wee bit? Don't see any there in the chat.
There's none in the chat room and no indication, but if there are any, if you want to speak up.
Leslie, sorry, it's Declan McAllister here again.
Yep.
And again, it's just representing probably the delegated limit for small arm's length bodies and how that will work in line with DHCNI. At the minute, we hold a £10,000 limit for the smaller bodies. We've had some engagement with Bridget Worth when she was in post about how that would potentially transfer over to DHCNI, with the possibility of seeing that limit increase a little, really to enable us to obviously take local decisions and take forward developments much quickly without having to go back to departmental sponsor branches for approval for anything over 10,000. I'm just wondering how that fits then with the business case route and approvals through yourselves.
Okay, so I was going to come on to the business case approval route, and I think your question's maybe more a finance one, and I don't think he's on the call today, or Mark. So maybe Declan, if I come back to you on that particular one.
Perfect, thanks.
After today, but I'll just move on then to describe the business case process. So although it's not strictly part of portfolio, the management of portfolio approach, the DHCNI team have a role in approving business cases, and that's largely because we have a delegated limit. No, we don't have it. Dan has a delegated limit of 1.5 million. Apologies if you can hear hammering in the background. There's a bit of work going on around the house today, and you might hear it from time to time. So all business cases that have a digital element under an organisation's delegated limits, as I understand it, Declan, maybe this answers your question, need to come through DHCNI. So if your organisation's delegated limits are less than 250k, which is the case with a lot of the ALBs, and having worked in RQIA, I'm well aware of the 10k delegated limit that they had, and you need to get further approval for business cases. So the business cases are, all digital business cases are submitted through the EPMO. And when we receive them, we will share them with colleagues on the team who have a domain knowledge of the area, if you like. So we always share the business case with the finance function in the first instance. One of the reasons for that is for them to be able to confirm to us that there's funding, if the funding is being sought from ourselves already in the budget identified for the case, but also to do a financial review on the business case. And then, as I said, depending on the subject matter, it'll be shared with the domain expert in that area. So, for example, if it's a business case to procure wireless network points, we'll share it with Mark Kendall, our colleague who's responsible for the enterprise architecture function. And for a lot of the bigger projects and programs, members of the DHCNI team are also members of program and project boards. So in that instance, if you're a member of a project board for which a business case has come in, we will ask that person to carry out a review. And we're reviewing it from a number of angles. We're reviewing it against strategic direction. So, you know, is it once for Northern Ireland? Is it against the DHCNI strategy when we have one? That kind of thing. We're also looking to make sure that the objectives and benefits are smart and that we are content with the benefits in the business case, that it's worth the investment, and as well as reviewing it from a technical point of view as well. So under 250k or an organisation's delegated limits, if your delegated limit is less than 250k, then it will be reviewed by the DHCNI team. And once the DHCNI team are happy with it, then Stephen Stewart, as the Assistant Director in DHCNI, has the authority to sign that business case. So that might mean that we do a set of comments and send them back to yourselves, or a new version of the business case to be submitted to us. And we're happy to meet with people and talk them through those comments as well, if that would help in responding to comments. We typically, I'll say to people, you need to allow 2 to 3 months from the point that we receive the business case for that approval to happen. So, you know, add to that the time it takes you to write the business case before that. And Stephen Powell, just to answer your previous question, I know you had a few business cases that had to come through us recently, and that was just because they were over the delegated limit of 250k, even though the funding wasn't coming from DHCNI, but because DHCNI have a role in approving digital business cases under the CDIO's delegated limit, they had to come through ourselves. Once a business case has been approved by or accepted by the DHCNI team, if it's over 250k, it then goes to the portfolio board for their review. The portfolio board, and Stephen Stewart as the chair of the portfolio board, then has the authority to assign a business case up to $500,000, but only once the portfolio board has agreed it. So between that 250k and the $500,000 mark, if the portfolio board are agree the business case and they're content with it, then it can be signed by Stephen. And we say typically allow 4 months at least for that process to run from the point that we receive it. I should have said that we try to review a business case and return it back to the author within 15 working days. That can be extended though at times a year, maybe around February, March time, where there's a lot of business cases coming in, and you know, capacity issues mean that it might take us slightly longer, but we try to stick that 15 days turnaround. It's not always possible. After a business case that's more than $500,000, then we'll have to go through the DHCNI board, and that's really just to ensure that they're content for it to be signed off. If it's under 1.5 million, then at that point Dan can sign it off. If there's a big gap between the portfolio board meeting and the DHCNI board meeting, And again, between the DHCNI being content with the business case and passing it on to the next stage, we will seek to do those approvals by email rather than sit and hold a business case for maybe up to 6 or 7 weeks before it can get approved to the next stage. So we do endeavour to do that by email if it's not possible to take it to an actual meeting. Again, we say allow at least 4 months for that process to run from the point that we receive it. And the reason I'm highlighting these timescales are that whenever you in your project, when you're considering your milestones, that this should have an impact on the milestones that you're setting for approval routes for business cases. If it's over 1.5 million and the DHCNI board are content, then we will submit it to the Department of Health. And as you all know, Department of Health have a delegated limit of 5 million. And so business cases under that 5 million they can approve. And when you add our timescales and the DOH timescales to it, they advise allow 6 to 9 months from the point that we receive it. And then finally, if it's over the 5 million, they then send it to the Department of Finance when they're content. And the timescales we would have advised to leave is between 9 and 12 months. Both the Department of Health and the Department of Finance advise that for the first submission of the business case to them, they try to respond within 20 working days, but subsequent submissions, they say allow 15 working days for them to come back to you with comments. We have developed some business case guidance. It's based on the Department of Health guidance, but it's just a document that pulls together the different approval routes in a bit more detail, explains that diagram in a bit more detail. It gives some hints and tips about things that make business case review easier for ourselves. It has links to the Department of Finance templates. Some of you, or maybe all of you, are aware that the Department of Finance have issued guidance or that they want all organisations to start using the 5 case model instead of the NIGAE model that we have always used. They have said that for any projects that are underway that are already writing an OBC under the old model, then to continue to do that. Or if you had an SOC approved as part of NIGAE guidance, then you can continue with your OBC on the same 10 case model. But they want organisations to start using the 5 case model, and they have issued some guidance around that. The Department of Health have advised that they have told Department of Finance that they are still in business continuity mode and haven't the time to consider their processes around approval of the 5 case model. So they haven't actually issued any additional guidance yet. We're working closely with them to understand what that means going forward. So I'm just making people aware of it. There are also a couple of online videos, I think, that people can access on the Department of Finance website that explains a wee bit more about the 5 case model. But once we get further guidance from the Department of Health, we will be changing our business case guidance and making that available to everybody. So it was really just to flag that and make people aware of that change that's coming up. And just again, in relation to the design report that is issued, this is the kind of information that we are submitting through the design report about the business case activity between design group and portfolio board meetings, and just gives you a sense of the number of business cases going through the process and the different ranges that they're in terms of approvals. And that's my section concluded. So I just pause for some questions, and then if everybody's content, we'll take a 10-minute break. So I'm just going to stop sharing so I can see people. And just ask, has anybody any questions about the business case process, the business case approval process before we pause?
Leslie, I was just saying that the state all very useful documents, and instead of asking for them all individually, could they be sent? All the documents be sent to this group so we can hold them central until you have a regional solution? Yeah. And then as anything changes in any of that guidance, we can make people aware and we can request the additional guidance. Don't see any other hands up or anything in the chat. So
Leslie, Stephen,
see Stephen waving frantically.
Thanks. No, it's obviously I'm conscious of Once for Northern Ireland, and I'm conscious of we all should be doing things the same way. We're stuck with an enterprise project management system called Microsoft EPM, funny enough, and it's old and grey and probably needs to go. And if we have these templates that are regionally defined, regionally agreed, is there an opportunity, given that Dan talked about consistency of approach, for their, I would love to be able to avail of this new project system that you talked, I think it was Cobra or Vision, or I can't recall what it is, but largely systems drive process. Hopefully they don't dictate it, but they certainly help in terms of consistency of approach for risks and issues, and etc. So is that where we're going? And if so, when can we get on the bandwagon?
It certainly would be something that we probably need to look at, Stephen. We haven't got access to the system fully ourselves yet because it's still in implementation. And when I say it's still in implementation, it was opportunistic for us in the DHCNI team to join with BSO as they upgraded the TV product, which you probably, as the product you're probably talking about, the older version of the product. I think the next phase of that, once we've got this implementation done, would be to look at, what would it mean to roll it out regionally, and what would the cost of that be? So I'm not saying no, and I'm not saying yes. I'm saying it's something that we probably should look at, because it would certainly make reporting a lot easier as well. It would save people having to, purposely fill in reports and highlight reports and submit them to DHCNI. We could pull the reports off. So, it is where we would like to go to. I don't know if Katie has any comments on that.
No, just to add to that, Stephen, I mean, I understand your point, and it is well made. There has been some developments in that space and around making sure that we have what we've put in place is standards, but I'm going to be covering that off in the next slot, so I'm happy to pick it up there. So some developments, yeah.
Should we submit a new request to use this new product?
Can't do any harm. Okay, so I don't see any questions there, and we had a 10-minute breakdown. We're running, or not breakdown, a 10-minute break. We are running a wee bit behind time, although I think we found yesterday we didn't use our full time. So by 3 minutes past 3, if I say we come back at 15:15, is that okay with Katie? Are you happy with that? 10 minutes, so 13 minutes past.
Sorry, I just meant convene at 10 past. Sorry, just convene at 10 past.
Oh, so Katie's only giving you 7 minutes for your coffee.
Quick break and convene back at 10. So I think we'll just keep the Zoom session open so that we'll not be sort of having people to rejoin or anything. So we'll just take it open and we'll reconvene at 10 past. Thank you. I'm not able to see people joining, so you can just give me a cue when to run. Thanks.
Most people stayed off camera the last time, so it's hard to know. But I think we're on camera before have come back on camera.
Yeah, there's very little people actually dropped off, so everybody's in the room.
Well, if we've hit sort of the magic 10 minutes past 3, then maybe I'll make a start. So it's back to myself, Katie Gunn, and I have about an hour to go through. So hopefully you've grabbed your coffee and that you're sitting comfortable for the next bit. I will take a couple of pauses through the hour session just at the end of each of the sections. So do feel free to use the chat. Jennifer has again agreed to keep an eye on it, and she will let us know if there's any questions that you have, and we'll pick them up today or we'll follow them up afterwards. But we would be very keen to hear your comments or your questions as we run through. So in this session and this section this afternoon, I have 5 sections that I want to pick up on And the first section is around portfolio delivery, and that's how we report against the projects that are making up the DHCNI portfolio list at the moment, how we set our dependencies or milestones on our dependencies, how we manage the issues and the risks, and how we manage any actions and decisions arising from those. And I'm happy to pick up on this section too, some of the comments that we picked up today and indeed yesterday about how we should make sure that we have taken a standardized approach to that, so that individual projects are certainly not having to report through different standards. So moving on to portfolio delivery, and I've just rehearsed very, very briefly the pyramid that we showed in the earlier part of the session this morning, where we have projects and programs along the bottom, and they will continue to report through their individual project and program governance structures at the moment. And they will also report through to the Enterprise Portfolio Office, and that's where we've been very clear that the same project highlight reports should be meeting the bill. We would not be expecting individual projects to report in different forums. And it's important that these groups along the middle in portfolio design delivery have all the information across the portfolio to enable them to make the right decisions and escalate that to the portfolio board. So specifically looking this afternoon at the Portfolio Delivery Group, and this is an extract from the Portfolio Delivery Group report that we share every 2 months with the Portfolio Delivery Group. And this is based on the information that comes from the individual project highlight reports. So this is the actual report that was presented at the March 2021 report. And so along the top on the left-hand side, it records that we have 46 projects that are currently making up the DHCNI portfolio. You may ask, which are those projects? And we're able to share the full pack, and it would be useful for delegates on this call. If you're not familiar with the full pack that goes to the Portfolio Delivery Group, we will certainly issue that out, and just contact the Portfolio Office and we're happy to share that. But those 46 projects are largely made up of regional initiatives, so there'll be no surprises in some of those, for example, in Compass or a regional laboratory system. Those regional initiatives are technical enablement projects, those that many of you are here representing. There are also a number of other projects that have come through from the portfolio design function, new projects that have made their way onto the list, and they would then make, most of them are those before we established the EPMO, but certainly some already we're seeing the outworkings of coming through portfolio design and into portfolio delivery. Most of those are also funded by the DHCNI fund, but not exclusive. So we may have some projects on that list which may not be funded by the DHCNI funding stream. For example, last year we would have had GPIP. The GPIP was funded by the Dementia Programme, didn't form part of our initial DHCNI funding stream, but because there was a call on perhaps similar resources that need to be commissioned from BSO ITS or other resources, there was an interest in those projects and being part of the DHCNI portfolio. So just to bear in mind the types of projects, picking up on maybe a question from some of the delegates earlier and indeed yesterday about should we have individual trust projects, and the Portfolio Delivery Group had agreed at our previous meeting that that's something that we should strive to have, that we should have particularly trust projects on the portfolio list and reporting through this structure where there might be an interest across other trusts. So if you're doing something maybe particularly innovative or something that other trusts would want to have an interest in, that might be one that we would decide should be part and parcel of that, but we'll take those on a case-by-case basis. But we will want to move to a point where we have all of our projects. At the moment, we have those 46, as I say, which are of strategic importance, helps us to meet our overall strategic objectives, and are largely funded by our DHCNI source and a few others. From that, we have 11 risks that have been escalated, and we have 36 issues. And we'll talk very briefly soon about how we get individual issues onto the plan and our management of those. Working across the top, then this is where we will align each of those 46 to the strategic objectives. Leslie illustrated and discussed earlier where we are very aware that we don't have a strategy in place. And in the absence of that, we are using the financial plan for 21-22 as really our overall strategic view for the next year. And soon we will have a development of a strategy, but that's where you would expect to see within the portfolio delivery where those individual projects are meeting each of those strategic objectives. In the middle section, we have the project stage overview. And here we have agreed across the portfolio with a number of stakeholders that there are 8 major stages, largely 6 in the middle, but 2 outliers. And the first one of those is project discovery. And that clearly sits in portfolio design, which Leslie has. So the 46 projects doesn't include any of those. 46 is indeed though made up out of the other stages. And then we have 1 at the end for support and maintenance. And those of you that are experienced project managers will be very familiar that support and maintenance clearly does not belong within the project stage. But there are some initiatives here, for example, NICR, although that project is in a closed state, it's still consuming a certain amount of resources. And for that reason, it's still part and parcel of the overall portfolio delivery. And there may be some other examples in that scenario as we move through the implementation of our tool sets. Along the bottom then we have, this is watermarked with dummy data in this case, but here we will be able to represent going forward then what is our approved and actual spend within each financial year in the context of what has been approved, and that's where you expect to see that information. Top of the right then we have our project RAG status for each of the projects. So in the last round of reporting to our delivery group, we reported that we had 4 projects and a RAG status. You can do the numbers on the remaining, but the last 2 here, significantly we had 6 that didn't report. And so that's for any project managers that are on the call, that's where you don't really want to be sitting here in one of those 6 that are not reporting. They attract a little bit more of attention, as do the reds. And just on that point, projects here that are sitting in a red state, that we may decide that it would be appropriate for either the SRO or a senior responsible manager within that project to come along also to the portfolio delivery group. That group is made up of representatives of most of the major programs or projects within the overall portfolio, and other stakeholders who can help us really look across the whole program and decide if there's any major issues that we need to escalate through. Working towards the middle section, I'm going to talk a little bit later about how we set our milestones across the overall program. And then on the bottom, we give an overall review of the risks and the issues. So that's the type of information, that is the information at the moment that we're presenting to the portfolio delivery group. And that really gets you to give a feel for the importance of the standardization of the data across our projects and that reporting structure, so that we're able to present something in a much more meaningful way. So key to be able to present that is the project highlight report. And we really need to emphasize that at every opportunity, that we really want each of our projects to be able to produce our project highlight reports in a timely manner. And Stephen, it was a question that you had raised, had we got standards in place for this? And we've done a lot of work with all of the 46 projects to be able to settle on an agreed project highlight report. We're also very keen that projects submit the same highlight report to the portfolio office that they would be agreeing through their project structures. That would not be advantageous for any organisation that they would have to submit a separate. So we've done a lot of work with those 46 projects to make sure that they are submitting the same standard data items in the same format across those projects. And that is fundamental to us being able to present the dashboard that we've just looked at. So there's no surprise in the information that is presented, and just in terms of the overall aim, it is important that the project highlight reports that we receive have already been approved by your SRO and your project board structures, and that you're submitting to EPMO a project highlight report that has already been approved, both within your individual projects and should you have a local PMO arrangement. So for any project managers that are on the call, you would be familiar that request for the next cycle had just gone out last week, and we're looking for returns for your latest highlight reports back by the 30th of April. And that will enable us to present, as I outlined at the top of the call, where we will be going through our next cycle of back to the portfolio delivery group meeting on the 12th of April, the 12th of May. So request out submission by the 30th of April, and then we take those back to papers out on the 7th of May, and we have the portfolio delivery group really looking through that dashboard and getting down into the detail on any issues that need to be addressed. There's no surprise in the content of the highlight report. We have an overall RAG status, and the definition of that is in the pack. For any projects that are not reporting in a green status, we looked to see if there is any mitigation process that we can put in place to help them to move to a green. We have key milestones, and the definitions of those have been agreed across the portfolio. So we'll share with the list of those. We're looking to see if there are any portfolio dependencies. Have you a project that has a dependency on another project or vice versa? What are the key issues and the risks? And again, we have processes agreed for those and how projects should report against those. And we'll share those in the later pack. If there's any financial issues that need to be raised, and then ultimately, what is the key actions and decisions that you would like to be made within the portfolio? So in terms of process, we have asked that all of those projects, and indeed we are pleased to report that, you know, generally across the portfolio, we do get project highlight reports submitted in a timely manner. It's also important, I should pick out that whilst we have 46, in every iteration, we are still coming across maybe a new project, maybe a project has come through for funding that maybe perhaps we weren't even aware needed to be added on. So in each of our previous 3 iterations of rounds of reporting cycles, we have identified that there's new projects still going. Obviously, last year we had an extensive number of new projects that were spun up for COVID, and we're just going through the transition of those projects that need to be taken forward. For example, our vaccination system, we would expect to see in our next round of reporting that those COVID projects will also make their way into the DHCNI portfolio and be reported. This governance chart just really highlights that we, you know, the requests for the project highlight reports will come through from EPMO, and that will go out from the DHCNI portfolio address, and has been. Project managers then submit those back through. There may be some challenge functions, and indeed, you know, if there's a section not complete, and you know, it may be there's different colleagues within the DHCNI team that will pick up on different aspects of those highlight reports. If there's any issues around the finances, then our finance colleagues within the team will be specifically looking at those. If there's some colleagues in the team have representation on respective project boards, and they will have a look at those highlight reports in that vein. So we may find that there's some challenge back, and once those are settled and agreed, then they are used to compile the portfolio delivery group report and dashboard, which we had presented at the slide back. And really this just using the opportunity then just to remind people of the really importance that it is to get your highlight report in time, so that we're able to produce that information, not just in terms of you know, producing a report for the sake of producing a report, but making sure that if there are particular issues within a project, that we get those addressed in a timely manner. The main route of submitting and updating the EPMO office for projects that are in flight is through the highlight reports, but we also have mechanisms in place between the reporting cycles. We had noted that the current reporting cycle is every 2 months, and we really recognise that if you have a significant major project that every 2 months is not timely enough to address that, we will move the portfolio delivery group, once we're more mature in our arrangements, into every month cycle. But outside of that, we do have arrangements in place if you needed to raise something within the EPMO or with EPMO, there is arrangements that can be done. And, you know, I think maybe even as Stephen had said, you know, this does not replace the lift the phone and have a chat with anybody in EPMO. Absolutely, those processes are still there. So I'm just going to pause before I move into the planning to check if anybody has any queries around reporting. So Jennifer, I'll move on, and I'll look to you to just interrupt me if I need to. Thank you.
And there's nothing on the chat and nothing, no indicators.
Okay, thanks very much, Jennifer. So the first section that I wanted to cover off was how we would set planning standards across the portfolio. And we have been doing a lot of work, both with each of the projects that make up the portfolio and with some of the PMOs in other organizations. And we now have a settled list of milestones at level 1 and level 2. The level 0 are our strategic outcomes, and they will typically be things like modernizing our infrastructure, and I don't want to be sort of preempting what will appear in our, but for the purposes of illustration, think something like improving our infrastructure or delivering a patient-facing service within a domain area. Those type of things will be, and as Leslie had outlined earlier, we are aware that we don't have a strategy in place, but typically those will be the types of things if we reflect back what was on our eHealth strategy. For each of those strategic outcomes, we will have a set of projects, and each project will have one of 6 level 1 milestones, and they're coming in the next slides, and we'll go through those. So those are a standard set of milestones that we've agreed across the portfolio. And within individual projects, there is also a subset of approximately 40 milestones that we have made available that individual projects may use a subset of. So projects don't necessarily have to use them all, but for those, but there are a standard set which have been set across all the projects, and these are coming in the next slides. Those projects that make up the 46 that are currently reporting through the portfolio are already well versed in those. And just for projects that are setting level 2, for anybody here that's representing projects that are not currently on the portfolio, you may want to start to have a look at these so that you're getting ready for should you have projects. I'm also aware that we have some members on the call today who are representing non-digital projects who have specific interest in establishing PMO, and this is the area that you may be more interested in setting project milestones, and they will be reporting through to your local PMO arrangement if you have one in place. So in terms of what are the level 1 milestones, and in order for us to be able to report against the portfolio, we need to have set a standard set. So Leslie had discussed in the earlier section about the typical activities that happen in the first phase. And at the outcome of that, we then have a level 1 milestone that says discovery complete. And the outcome of that may be it's an initiative that we're going to take forward or we're not. But across the portfolio, for projects that are in discovery, we have a level 1 milestone which reads discovery complete. For those initiatives that we have agreed that should be taken forward, or for those that are already in flight, there are 6 stages that we have set a level 1 milestone. So within the project startup stage, the typical activities that happens here are that you will be establishing your project board or your program board. You'll be looking at the enterprise architecture requirements. You may be required to produce an SOC. And the level 1 milestone that we have set is that it'll either read your startup is completed or your SOC is approved. And that's the same that we will set across the portfolio. For projects then that move into the initiation stage, the typical activity here is the business case, and Leslie has already taken you through the business case process. And at the end of that, we have a level 1 milestone which reads your OBC is approved, whatever level that might be. Should it be a small project with a small business case, or it should be a larger, but the outline business case appropriate to the project will be approved, and that's the level 1 milestone. Moving quickly across the stages, and projects that are in the design and procurement. So you're getting ready to do your procurement. You've engaged with the data privacy and information governance structures. And we again set a level 1 milestone to say that your procurement complete. And I don't intend to go through each of these, but the other 3 then are that your project is ready to go live, that your implementation is complete, and that your project is closed. So those are just at a very high level, 7 level 1 milestones that we've agreed across the portfolio. And those are the ones that have come under most attention through the portfolio delivery group. For each of those, we do have a set of level 2s. Projects can use these and tailor these as they are appropriate within their individual projects. For example, we're aware that smaller projects don't have an SOC. So if we're looking at our project startup stage here, you will have your project structures to put in place, but you may not need to have an SOC approved or drafted. So, those wouldn't be appropriate. And again, smaller projects could have approval within the DHCNI or DOH. They don't need a 2.4 but what we are asking is that projects all report through using the same numbers where they are appropriate. And, for projects that become part of the portfolio, we will explain that if required in a little bit more detail. For those projects that are not part of the portfolio and may want to start to get standardized reporting, we'll make all of this information available. There's some assumptions, and this is in terms of, I'll just particularly draw out the assumptions at the bottom of the slide. And when a project has, we agree it has moved from discovery and we have agreed that this is an initiative that's going to be taken forward, we will agree with the project that at least the first 2 years level 1 milestones. If it's a small project, that may be all 6 of the level 1 milestones. If it's a somewhat larger project and looking at the business case approval process that Leslie has taken us through, for some of your very large projects, it could be up to that 9-month period. So you may get a little more done in your first 2 years than getting your project started up and getting your business approved. So we would only be looking to set the first few level 1 milestones. But if it's a much smaller one, we will look to set that across the duration of your project. We have actually agreed through our portfolio delivery group that we will also produce a 5-year delivery plan, which will look at all of the level 1 milestones and all of the dependencies. And just the last note, which Leslie has already picked up on, is that when you're setting milestones, you should consider then the DHCNI business case guidance that has been issued, so that we're setting realistic timescales. And that applies not just within the business case, but in other areas. So for example, within your design and procurement, there is no point in setting a milestone that your procurement is going to be completed within the 6-month period if realistically that's not within your project plans, because that's what we will be monitoring against. And this flowchart really just explains that work where we get, we set new milestones, they will come into EPMO, there'll be a process of change, milestones that you've already set may need to change, and you may have new ones. So that flowchart, quite detailed, don't intend to go through it today, but that just really illustrates the process of needing to change. So at the moment, all of this is currently managed by a good old spreadsheet. And as we had already articulated, we are going through the process of configuring the Cora PPM toolset. It is spelt C-O-R-A as in the name, and then PPM for those that are not familiar with it. And what we've been doing is taking the processes that we are talking through you today and configuring the tool set for all of these processes that are in the portfolio delivery function. So the milestone tracker that I am currently sharing with you on the screen, which will capture the milestones that we've just talked about, we have configured the tool set to have a direct match against this. So the milestone tracker and those that are representing projects that are currently on are familiar with completing this and have had numerous calls from the EPMO and really trying to settle down the detail in this. There's no surprises. All milestones get a unique number. We capture here at the moment which domain area and which project it's from. And then we're looking at which level of milestone. Is it the strategic level? Is it a level 1 or is it a level 2? We capture some information about the milestone, and then we take an original baseline. And that baseline will be when your project initially is commissioned, and then if it needs to be re-baselined as the project proceeds. We indicate for each of the milestones then what is the current forecast. So we will take those and agree them with the project at the start of the project, and then we will monitor against those. And the RAG status is the opportunity then for the project manager to report on that project highlight report, which we've just talked about a couple of slides back. That's where you give a RAG status against the milestones that are set. We have an owner and we have an approval form of who needs to agree your milestones. So we have offered this, and we've given the trackers to all of those projects that are reporting through to the portfolio office. And here you can complete this with all your level 1s and all your level 2s, even so that you don't have additional trackers to maintain, but within the portfolio, we are only specifically interested in the level 1 milestones, but we will also have an interest in a few of our level 2s where, particularly if they're larger projects, and we will agree those with you. This just gives us some of our best practice points. So our milestone tracker is available on our SharePoint site. Leslie had mentioned earlier that we would want to be moving to a position where we are able to share this information, and we don't have the infrastructure in place to facilitate to do that, but we do have that on our local SharePoint site. And I think one of the earlier calls said, could we send all out in a pack? And we're happy to do that at the end of the call if anyone wants. We are working towards the Cora, we are working towards the Cora toolset for the configuration. And just as we move through each of these sections in portfolio delivery, I will just revisit, that's how we've configured those earlier deliverables from the toolset. Much more to be done, but the toolset, the ones that I'm referring to through this section, have been configured. Changes to the milestone, and there'll always be milestone changes. They should be made on the milestone tracker and sent through to the EPMO. And this slide then just represents, for each of the 46 projects, the overall plan for the 5 years. So the key to this is the milestone level 1s that we have on the top right hand corner. So for each of the projects, those are tracked across the whole plan. I'll just pause and check if there's any queries on setting level 1 milestones, level 2s, or the overall plan.
Katie, there's no comments in the chat room. The only comment would be maybe Stephen would like to see an aggregated highlight report for our programme, but there's no other comments.
Okay. So if I just making sure that I've picked up your individual query. So would this be, for example, if you have a couple of projects or more reporting within an individual program? Is that the question, Steve?
It's probably both, I suppose openness and transparency. Obviously the portfolio board and it's right that they see it, but in terms of us, I was about to say us per minnows in the trusts, see the rich picture in terms of the program and what's happening and what's likely to happen that may impact us or otherwise. It just makes sense. If you had your intranet site or SharePoint site, I would love to be able to go in and see what great work is happening across all of the organizations.
So that's in terms, I thought you were looking for the individual program reports, but all of the information that comes from individual project highlight reports, for example, an issue or any of those that make their way onto are submitted through a project highlight report and make their way into the portfolio are also presented to the delivery group, and that's a full pack. Some of these extracts I have coming in the next slides, and we'll be happy to share out that full deck with you. Yeah. So those of you that have had a few seconds to just absorb the overall plan will be very aware that it's very good to have all the milestones and all of that set, still more work in progress, but what we're missing is what are the dependencies between projects. And there's a number of pieces of work underway, still in development on that, but we do have agreed a dependency process. And again, all of those projects would be familiar with EPMO ringing and contacting and arranging meetings. Over the last particularly the last 6 months, we ran an EPMO dependency workshop in October. And since that, we have had a number of check-ins with project managers across the programs to try to get us into the more mature dependencies. Still more work to be done. So just at a fundamental level, there are, as you would expect, 2 levels of dependencies, inbound and outbound, and explained at the top. So our inbound is the areas who are dependent on another project. So if you have a project and you're depending on something being delivered from another project. So we have some projects in the portfolio who are dependent on, for example, Encompass in delivering something. So that entry would go in as an inbound. We have some projects who they are delivering something. So in that particular case, Encompass is delivering something. So that would be one entry in the dependency log, flagging inbound and outbound. There are 3 types of dependencies, where they're in between individual projects or programs, or whether within one project and another, or where there's an external dependency. And the external dependencies are those which may be outside the control of the portfolio. But for example, e-pharmacy has at the moment an external dependency where they are relying on legislative change being made by the department to facilitate electronic prescriptions. So those are, it's not an individual project, but it's referring to some change that's outside the project. Bottom of the slide, we're going through what actually would classify and how you would decide if you needed to register an entry onto the EPMO list. And we're just working through, is it something that needs to be delivered for you? Would somebody mind if it wasn't delivered? So those types of activities is fairly much a checklist that we've asked our projects to go through, and that leaves an entry in our log. And this is the dependency log. Again, it's developed as a spreadsheet at the moment, and it forms part of our processes. And this is what we've configured on the Cora tool set, and when I say configured in Core, it's very much still in a development state. The tool set's there, but we are still configuring to meet our needs. So the entry on a dependency log will refer to this column, which is our inbound dependency, and the outbound, which is the project which is facilitating the delivery of the requirement. It also makes a direct tie to our milestones, which we referred. So we are asking for all dependencies to be tied back to our milestones, and the typical entry about who owns the milestones and a RAG status. So those are, we have a dependency matrix, which is readily available as well for anyone on the call that would like to have. So, and I mean, it is very important, and Dan referred to that during his introduction, that we're trying to make sure that we're are visible with our projects and very transparent. So all of this information we're quite happy to share. So that brings me to the end of the first 2 sections around delivery reporting and milestone dependencies. I'm going to take a short pause if there's any questions before I move into issues and risk management. And I look to you, Jennifer.
Hi, Katie. There's no comments in the chat room. I'm just having a look at the screens. There's no little hands up. But if there is anybody, please talk.
Good. I'll move on then, and people can use chat if they need to. And they briefly going to cover our approach to managing risks and issues within the portfolio. So referring back to the delivery reporting dashboard, these are the issues and risks that appear down the left-hand side, where we have 11 risks and 36 issues. And then we've given a RAG rating for those on the bottom right-hand corner. For those that are experienced project managers, we're not expecting that we're delivering to you anything new. I mean, many on the call, whether you're project managers or you're operating at a PMO or you're operating at an executive level, you're very well versed in what issues and risks are. So we don't intend to labour on the point too much, but just some fundamental principles that our issues and risks does lie at the very heart of our overall portfolio management. And we are asking that they are captured honestly. If there are a risk within your project, that it is captured. We have no evidence to suggest that is not the case. And we're quite happy then when risks do come through, it gives us some confidence in the management of those at a project level. Those should be monitored and categorized in a consistent way, and we have guidance on the processes that we have in place. And what we have in place is a mechanism where you may have within your individual projects a mechanism for recording, but we are offering to you the standard risk and issue logs that we have within EPMO that you need to report to if you have an issue or a risk to escalate. But it would be appropriate that you could use the same logs that we have. Now, we're not being prescriptive that you need to change your processes, but if you need to report through to EPMO an issue or a risk, there is a standard that you need to report that to us. So for that reason, you may find that it is appropriate that you're recording. We're not being prescriptive. We're not saying that that is the way that you should record your issues and risks. And to facilitate that, we've been working very closely with, in particular, BSO ITS, and how they record issues and manage, and trying to agree standard processes for management of issues and risks to make sure that project managers do not have to have a different process. So there's a number of things, and we're quite happy to share those logs. All entries in the EPMO, or sorry, all entries in the risk and list management log are available on our shared drives, and we ask that we have a full commentary on any changes that are made on. But I do want to draw out today that what we're interested in a portfolio issue and management log is portfolio issues and risks. So you may have risks and issues managed within your local project that do not need to go to the portfolio office for management at a portfolio level. And if they are being managed within a local project, then they would not be registered on the portfolio register. But if you have a particular project issue and risk that does need to get escalated, then this would be the form to mark it on your existing log and have it escalated through to the portfolio. And that flowchart that is really drawing out what the issue that we're raising. So projects and will continue to identify and manage issues at a project level, but where there are particular portfolio issues, they will be managed by the portfolio governance. Issues and issue management are in the next section, and there's one of the key points that we have been working with some of the organisations, and indeed across the 46 project, is this RAG status and a standard definition. And again, there's no real surprises in the definition that we've settled on, that projects that are in a green state, that they have no major issues or no issues on the delivery against the committed baseline. Amber, where there are some issues, but we have a mitigation in place. And red, therefore, where we have major issues and we don't have a mitigation process in place. So there's no real sort of surprises in that. But we would be asking when a project would categorise a risk that is categorized in the same standard, back to the point earlier that, you know, in order for us to be able to collate the information and present it in a standard way, we need our projects reporting in a standard way. So again, no surprise, we have a portfolio log at the moment. Again, this is held in on a spreadsheet within the EPMO, but we have configured the EPM or the Cora PPM toolset, which is very much aligned to the spreadsheet that we are referring to. No surprises again, each issue has a unique ID. We reference a project where that's appropriate. We give a heading for the issue, and it's a record who has raised by and the date, who owns the issue, and what is the impact across the portfolio. We have a RAG status, and then the escalation forum. And that's the one that I wanted to draw out, because if you have an issue that has been managed within your project, the escalation forum will just read project. And if you're using the same logs to forward, or the same highlight reports to send information, those, if we receive issues that are being managed within individual projects, we will exclude those from our portfolio. But if you have an issue that you need to send to the portfolio, then you will mark your escalation forum as portfolio. If you know it is a particular issue for a design, you will mark it for portfolio design. If you know it is an issue for portfolio delivery, you will mark it for portfolio delivery. And if you're not sure, you will mark it for EPMO. Similarly for risks, the risks will, and there's no real surprises in this, we have agreed a 5x5 model across our projects that are reporting within the portfolio list at the moment. It's a 5 by 5 in terms of the likelihood and the impact. And there's some deviations across some organizations in the actual matrix, and we'll continue to work on that, recognizing that a standard would be, at this stage, we are very pleased that we are all using the 1 5 by 5. There's just a little bit of difference in the interpretation of that, and we'll continue to work through how we can manage that. But that would not distract anyone from being able to record a risk and send it through to a portfolio office. And again, then we have a standard risk log for the recording of portfolio. They don't need to go through all of the tabs, but fairly standard practice of recording, giving it a unique number and then tracking that through. What I'm sharing on the screen now is an actual extract of the issue log that went to the portfolio delivery group in March. And there was no significant, I think we looked at the first slide that there was 36 of these, and I just took the first 4 that was on the issue list. So there's apologies for any delegates that are on the call that actually here representing some of these projects, but there were the first 4 that was extracted from that list. So just to give you a feel for typical entries that are in the portfolio list. Now if we aggregated all the issues and risks within individual projects, we would have 100 of these, but we really only had 36 that we brought through to the portfolio delivery group. And the first one, for example, was a digital workplace program. So it had an ID. It's attached to the project reference number DH312. And there's a description on, in that case, was to do with some funding. It was raised by Stephen, dates missing, and it was given our previous RAG and it's still in a RAG status. Similarly, we had one for cybersecurity. So that attracted attention because it was more within an issue within an individual project, because there was dependencies on the deliverable on other projects, and there was also an impact across the funding across the whole of the portfolio. So those types of issues would be classified as a portfolio issue. Similarly, within the security program, and then we record that actually went from an amber status to a red, largely around funding and resources. The pharmacy had an issue registered about the no common identifier. That was a new entry, and that one and would have gone to the portfolio delivery group or design group. And the last one was around blood pattern track. And again, this one was around an OBC approval. So those are just typical entries that we would see in the issue log, and representing the information that is presented to the portfolio delivery group. The flowchart then just illustrates the process. No, that's the wrong one. So that brings me to the end of the issue and risk management section. And again, I'll just pause before I go into the last section around actions and decisions if members have any issues that they want to ask about those two.
There's nothing on the chat at the moment, Katie.
Thank you, Jennifer. So we're heading into the last section, you'll be pleased to hear, around portfolio actions and decisions. So if we refer back to our highlight report, we have covered off many of the sections in our highlight report where we have what are the key issues and the key risks, what are the key achievements of the milestones from the last period, and what are our milestones for the next period. And the last section that I want to talk to today around what is in the highlight report is what are the key actions and decisions. And here we're specifically looking across the portfolio for what are the actions and decisions that need to be made by the portfolio. So if you have an action and decision at a project level that needs to be made within your project level, you can record that on the one log and mark it for escalation, or you can just not include it in your portfolio highlight report when it comes through to the portfolio. So I just wanted to rehearse that, because I know we have some concerns with some projects that they're having to complete 2 highlight reports. What we want you to do is to complete the one standard one. If you send through to the portfolio office the one standard highlight report, and you have some project issues on it, and you have some project risks on it, and they're marked as project issues, and you have some project actions, we will just ignore those when they arrive at the portfolio office, assuming that that's what you want us to do with us. If you have some issues and risks and actions and decisions on your highlight report and you haven't marked them as project issues, then we will probably need to challenge back to you and ask, are these ones that we need to be raised? It may be obvious from the context of what has actually been written, where they need to be escalated through to the portfolio. But if not, that's the type of activity that would be happening in that challenge back function. So the action and decision log, again, for those that are very familiar with managing projects at a project level or at an executive level, looking at actions and decisions that need to be taken, there's no real surprises in what, and it's back to that point around just being very clear that we have a standardized approach in what we're recording. We're all recording the same thing, and we have a clear escalation route. We have agreed that actions and decisions should be recorded within our logs within a 48-hour period. And that's just picking up on the point which I had referred to at the start of the session, where our main role or our main route to getting information from projects into EPMO is through the highlight report. Now, there will be many other times where that cycle doesn't suit. And there will also be issues and decisions on the respective logs which don't arise from individual projects. For example, within EPMO, we're under-resourced and we need more resources. So those entries would also be in the portfolio logs, the appropriate register, and they wouldn't have came from an individual project. So it's just important to stress that point too. We might also have other issues or actions that are arising from other parts of the portfolio governance, and they would all be registered within the appropriate logs. But if you're responsible for a project and that you need to send something to EPMO and it's outside your reporting cycle, we did agree through the last portfolio delivery group that you should then just email those through, clearly marking that what the project that you're referring to and what are the issues, and they will come through to the DHCNI portfolio address that Leslie has already shared on the screen. So that's a mechanism so that we can capture information, not ideal, but it gives us some mechanism to capture information outside that reporting cycle to make sure that we are capturing that. And we have taken an undertaking that we will reply back to those within a 48-hour period. So as per the previous logs, we have an action log and a decision log. I don't intend to go through each of the sections, but no real surprises. If it's a project one, you will have a project entry, and you will record where the forum is that it needs to be escalated and some dates, and similarly across the decision log. What I should have said, as all of these processes that we're sharing with you are already in what we're referring to as the EPMO Handbook. This has been an ongoing development over the last sort of 12 months where we are putting together all of these processes. So all of the processes that I've outlined today and which Leslie has referred to are in our EPMO handbook, are in the process of being in the handbook. And once that is at a fairly settled stage, we will issue that out for your consumption. It's just a full, fairly beefy handbook. But we've taken the extracts from that today, including these slides, which I'm referring to give you some flavour of the handbook. But the overall handbook is available within EPMO. And when we have fairly settled on that, we're happy to share that out. But certainly those logs that we've referred to today, those are already available. So what I'm sharing here just is, again, an extract of the portfolio action and decision log, which we currently have. And again, just the first few open actions that are on in the interest of being transparent. I didn't do any huge editing or selection of which ones appeared on the list. These are just four top open actions that we have. So those are the type of activity that we would have as an open action. None of these, if I look down through, are specifically about an individual project. The first one is about GRAIN terms of reference. The second one was around GRAIN our dependency process. So those are types of, but just to give you an idea of a populated entry in our action log, you would see the different columns being populated and then a running commentary on the right hand side. And the bottom one is an action for the design group, and the one at the very bottom is portfolio board. So it just gives you a feel for how actions within the individual governance structures get recorded here, and similarly for decisions. And the last, I have just 2 slides to refer to. And this slide, which I don't expect you to be fit to read, but on the first time, so this is how we are managing this, and shock horror for those that are sitting at the moment to discover that we're managing this all with spreadsheets. We are trying our best to do better. But so on the portfolio overall tracker, on the portfolio list, you will see all of the projects that we're currently managing. And then here are the tabs that we have just gone through: how we're managing our risks, our issues, our milestones, our dependencies, and our finance tab. Any information that is presented through here, and we will be discussing with our finance colleagues within the team. And we keep an entry of changes. So that's a fairly typical information. I was able to zoom this out from sharing, but so that's, you will see the sort of the RAG status, and we have contact details for each of the projects, who's the project manager, who's the SRO, who to contact, that type of activity, and then we keep a RAG status. So that is used to drive much of the information that we collect and manage across the portfolio, and certainly drives the dashboard that I showed at the first screen. We are, as I say, moving through the configuration of the Cora PPM toolset, and I've just given an extract just of a demo version of the toolset. So the types of information that we have showing you on the dashboard will soon become available through the Cora PPM tools. More work to do, but there's some early deliverables of the tool set, and we hope to sort of start to move with some of the early deliverables to help us progress. In terms of licensing, and just staving off some questions that might arise in that. So Leslie has already mentioned the tool set, and it certainly was an opportunistic, wasn't that the word, Leslie? I think you used opportunistic, that we were able to do a joint procurement of an upgrade for the Cora PPM toolset, and BSO ITS have been using this substantially already. Their earlier version of the toolset PV, largely around finances, but certainly around many aspects of managing projects. So they're simply doing a migration. Portfolio Office are new to the tool set and have been configuring that. But as part of that configuration has very much driven us down into standardizing our processes around highlight reports, around issue management, risk management, so that because we only have the one opportunity to configure the tool set. So for anyone else that would be considering maybe using this tool set going forward, you'll probably want to ensure that you're starting to shape up registering all of that type of information in a similar format. So I'm not sure of the totality of the licenses, but we certainly have some licenses for the 46 projects that are making up the portfolio office. What we've agreed are that the projects that are, so about half of those projects are currently reporting through BSO PMO. So, you know, you would expect to see LIMS and NIPACs and, you know, so many of the big hitter projects. And the other half, Encompass being one of them, will have a license to the solution. But some of our other projects, for example, our community system projects, which are not being managed, that those entries and management of those will be undertaken by the DHCNI EPMO. So we will still take the highlight reports, but we will manage the direct entry. So we have licenses within DHCNI, BSO ITS have licenses, and we'll work with each of the organisations to see what that licensing model for anyone who might want to engage with the tool set, what that might look like. So that brings me to the end of the presentation. So I'm going to pause and then I'll open the floor if anyone has any questions for me or Leslie and any of what you've seen.
Katie, there was just a comment in the chat room from Stephen, and he may ask himself. Just regarding about, was DHCNI getting any support from any outside organisation to inform the approach?
I'm happy to take that, and then Leslie can join in as well. So at the start of the EPMO, in terms of approach, the first thing we mentioned at the start of the call was that these are two new functions within the DHCNI team. So to give us some initial background, several members of the team undertook portfolio management training. So that's about 2 years ago, 18 months ago. And following that, then we engaged with Deloitte to give us an assessment initially of the portfolio maturity that we had within our organization, largely looking at portfolio and within the DHCNI team, not within how projects are being managed. And because it was a new function, there was no surprise that that evolved as a maturity of 1, I think, on a scale of 1 to 5. And there was no surprise in that. And I think they would have given us a 0 if there had been 1 possible. And there was absolutely no surprise in that. So since then, we've had a number of engagements, both from Deloitte and from Gartner, to help us shape up what an EPMO and a suitable EPMO for the DHCNI team. So some external engagement, some development within the team, and some engagement and communication with stakeholders, for example, BSO/ATS and others that are managing projects. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'll ask Leslie if she wants to add to that.
Nothing really to add, except to say that I did mention earlier about portfolio prioritization methodologies, and that those are the sources of the standard methodologies that are used. So there's, I've had some engagement with them about the use of those. And would maybe look to Gartner to give some support to a development workshop of that prioritization model once we have a strategy in place. So a combination of some advice from external bodies, and have to say a lot of hard work on Katie's part and my part to get us where we are.
I think what I would have said, I prefaced the statement the question by saying it is very impressive, and I suppose the opportunity is for everyone, everyone to come up to that level, because obviously I'm coveting this and saying how could we apply this across all of the organisation or all of the system, and that's the opportunity, because we've got a PMO, a virtual PMO 1.0. It should be a 2.0. We haven't quite got there because of the demands on service, and I'm sure if they came in to do a maturity rating, we'd be -1 maybe, and that's only to be improved.
Philip, you have your hand up there.
Yeah, just to reiterate, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very interesting. You've done a lot of hard work, so well done. It looks very impressive. Just following on a couple of points. One of the ones was about the training. I suppose one of the things we look to do within our program and projects office is to have a training plan. I'm just wondering, could you share with us any of the courses maybe your staff have been on, the PMO office, the project managers, how to deal with issues, risks, if you could share maybe what training you have been on. And I suppose just secondly, Katie, it was very nice to meet you. I haven't met you before, and I hope we touch base again soon. I'm just wondering, would it be worth considering some sort of regional group to help support program offices, project managers? It'd be good to meet up regularly and kind of share stories and help each other. And just wondering, has that been considered or something that could be considered?
That's a really good proposal, and I'll let Leslie add. I'll just get a couple of lines on that, and then Leslie can come in on. I'm not familiar, but I'm happy to be proved otherwise. If there is a project manager forum, I know some time back, and other colleagues in the call might remember that we did at one stage have a number of forums that we thought would be good for, and it was something we were looking to the beaches to lead, and we were considering as part of the early workings of the strategy, where we would have like a project manager forum, and there was a technical forum, and that I'm not quite sure if they ever really had much legs, but I think you're going to come in, Leslie.
No, they came out of, if you remember, the show and tell events that we had done, and I think that was one of the things that came out of that. There was an attempt to set up a number of special interest groups, I suppose there were, but
right.
I don't know whether they took off or not, but it's a good suggestion, and it's something that we
I think that is something that we point well made, Philip, and that's something that I certainly wasn't aware of, but I recognize that we're doing what we're doing that would be useful to have. And just the other point around training, and we're not in any way, nor had we intended to to set ourselves out as any panacea. We were given the roles as part of the new capability model, so we've just having to get on and do with tasks that we were given. So what you're sharing, we've been happy to share, and quite happy to take criticisms as we've had along the way, and that's all good. But I suppose in terms of training. And what would you have found? Yes, we got formal training as we got, but it's hard to beat actually getting down into, and lots of that tweaking and what columns should be in a risk log and what should be in and what. You're never going to get that from training, so that has only been, through the pain of actually either you've been a project manager and you're used to recording, or you're agreeing across a PMO office. So it's really been a lot of that sort of process. And, my hat's off to, there's, I know looking at the list here that there's lots of people, and Nadine, if you don't mind me calling you out, and Ronnie, and I know Alex is here as well. Lots of people here on the call are familiar with completing the risk logs and highlight reports and that we currently have in place, and they have helped us shape what those standards should be.
So certainly a forum where we can learn from each other, it could only be a good thing.
Great. So a couple more minutes if there's any more calls or any more questions, please do add, and then we'll happy to close this, and then we'll prepare a pack of information going out. And I suppose maybe one thing we should say, maybe we didn't cover off yesterday. I mean, it may be that some people have some questions that they don't really want to raise in the forum. So do by all means take it as a read, but do by all means lift the phone and have a chat with Leslie or me, and any parts of that come through Jennifer, the portfolio office, to do that, and we're quite happy to help where we can. Nothing more from me, Leslie, if you want to close.
No, I have nothing more. So if everybody is happy, we'll close the call.
We'll close. Okay, enjoy the
Thank
rest
you
of the
for your
evening.
time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Bye. Thank you.